think as well, probably because of that, there's also like quite a lot of individuals that sort of know what they can get away with, and they're sort of willing to, push the boundaries a bit there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree.
Tradies and contractors making over $50,000 a month in revenue. I will guarantee you 30 qualified leads in the space of 90 days, or it is free. You heard that right. It's 30 qualified leads in the space of 90 days, or it's free. And you're probably sitting here thinking, what the heck? That's a 10x result on what I'm currently getting from my marketing. And that's the point. We have finally cracked the code. We've got this amazing new process. It is working, and we are absolutely rolling this out big time. Head across to tradie.wiki/offer. That's tradie.wiki/offer. Fill in the form, book a time to have a chat, and we look forward to helping you grow. Ciao.
Frank, g'day. Welcome to the Site Shed podcast.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it, mate.
How's things at your end?
Yeah, good. Really good. Very busy.
Nice.
As we know, it's a busy environment out in
Compliance
tradie
world.
land. Exactly.
Cool. Yeah. So, mate, we're here today to talk a little bit about some of the issues revolving around harassment and bullying within the workplace. The reason that sort of piqued my interest was, well, first of all, I've never done it, but which is astounding after almost 400 episodes. But second of all, I think for the listeners and viewers out there that are, as their organizations grow, there are certain screws you probably need to tighten up a little bit in relation to some of these things. Man, I remember when I went through my apprenticeship, like there is not a chance in hell that you'd get away with what happened going like back then today.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm visiting sites all the time, and there's just this sort of aura of should be right, mate, and
Oh yeah.
and that reality is quite confronting for someone I'm not from a trade background. I've got small business background, but I understand the complexities of developing businesses and managing businesses and working from that side of things. But to see they should be right, mate, have a crack at someone on the side type scenario, which happens still, and quite prevalent, is quite confronting for someone who's coming in from the outside looking in, and that's interesting from that point of view. So there's a fair amount of onus and responsibility now on all business owners, that are running their own businesses, and that workplace sort of compliance with WorkSafe and safety obviously is critical, and mental health that comes from bullying and harassment is where I think the real sort of challenges are to move forward from.
I suppose in essence, it's becoming like today, a conversation around culture, right? And how you sort of breed that into your culture. So you don't have situations like this. Well, I mean, I don't know if you could ever completely avoid these situations, but you can certainly mitigate them.
Oh, you can. And, as a changing of the guard, Matt, with, generations of tradespeople coming through, I mean, people maybe a little bit older than us or same sort of age in that sense, and younger who are starting their businesses, there is a shift. There's a shift from from an age perspective, from a Y gen, X gen, Y gen, sort of millennial type scenario. There is a shift of understanding, and I think that's the critical component here about what was accepted back in the 90s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s to what it is now is not, and I think that's clearly happening.
At the end of the day, is it, I suppose, a matter of the business sort of protecting themselves from an obligatory perspective, legally, making sure they're ticking boxes on that front?
Oh, I think so. I think that's really important. It's easy just to continue to go as it's been done in the past. But there's a heap of legislation that's coming out all the time in reference to the obligations of the owner of a business and what their responsibilities are to keep a safe and a safe workplace, right? So that's not necessarily mitigating falling off ladders or cutting themselves with a saw. That scenario is quite evident. It's all that mental, psychosocial type workplace mitigation that it's pretty hard for some people to put into place and understand, I suppose. That's the other thing. It's how they actually apply it, how they understand what's important, what I need to do from an obligatory point of view, from a compliance point of view, in comparison to what's practical on the work site.
Yeah,
so
sure.
You know what I mean? It's really a tricky scenario, but it's awareness and education around what their responsibilities are.
Totally.
Some of the regulators don't really care too much whether you know or you don't know. The reality is, it is what it is.
And in essence, are we talking here about how you could, I mean, like you say, upskilling and learning about these various, I won't say issues, but things that you need in order to sort of become compliant within what we're going to be discussing today, in the space of harassment and bullying and things like that. But then also like defining and making it part of like your process or your cadence or however you communicate with your team or whatever that looks like.
Yeah, look, it's just as easy as just making sure that the questions are asked at a toolbox meeting.
Right.
How's everyone feeling? They might get laughed off the site in some instances, but there is a change towards that reality about how's everyone feeling, what's happening. There was a situation happened yesterday. What are we going to do about it? How can we avoid it in the future? It's just asking the questions. But then again, toolbox meetings generally, in my experience, work around what's happening on the site from a practical point of view, from an operational point of view, from what needs to be done today. It's just taking that step of asking the question around how people are feeling about bits and pieces.
That's kind of why I asked. Like, I wonder if it then just becomes, I mean, traditionally, well, my experience going back 1,000 years, when I was, out on sites, like toolbox talks were very much, conversations around the job site and things that are happening, I suppose, from a hands-on point of view. And like now it just seems like it needs to be included as part of the conversation checklist where you discuss other stuff, mental health, how you feel. I mean, it must be a tricky one to address. Like we got a bunch of tradies. I don't imagine everyone was like, oh, I'm just feeling a little bit emotional today. Like, does that even happen? Or is part of the conversation, well, listen, here's the process. If you are not currently feeling great and you want to talk to someone, these are the steps that you can take instead of like announcing it to the group.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It's about discretion as much as anything else. It's knowing your people on the site. There's a lot more openness. It's asking for feedback. It's having those one-on-ones. It's maybe sending a text out. It's all that sort of really sort of basic interpersonal type stuff that supervisors, managers, owners of businesses have to sort of embrace in order to get a real understanding. They have a duty of care. I suppose that's the critical component as an owner of a business. They've got to do their due diligence about where they're at in reference to psychosocial sort of issues on a site, and then they have to make sure that once they identify what those risks can be, they've got a duty of care to try and have that consultative approach with their employees, with their subbies. Bearing in mind, don't forget, it also affects subbies, even though they may be independent. Anyone who's on a site that's working for a particular builder or whatever the case may be, they've got the responsibility from a workplace health and safety perspective around that site. So
Frank, you're from Workplace Compliant. What do you guys specifically do over there?
Yeah, look, we help to work with all businesses, but a big part of our clientele is trades and really assessing what they have in place in reference to protecting themselves from a work safe claim, workplace health and safety issues and processes, making sure things like their SWIMs and their SOPs, and they have a workplace health and safety management system in place. I mean, it's just having that system, and also the record keeping side of things, you know, noting down, you know, near misses and noting down your toolbox meetings and knowing that people are there. It's that process. A lot of our tradies that we work with have swims, but they're sort of throwing a manual in the back of the ute and
Sure.
and not really reference at all. It's just making sure that everyone on site is aware of what they are and they've acknowledged that they've actually seen those type of documentation for a start. And that comes with policies, comes with mental health, comes with alcohol, it comes with social media, it comes with
lockdowns,
bullying and harassment. You know, we basically make sure we protect the employer. I think this is the critical difference between what we do and what someone like WorkSafe does, is that they protect the rights of the employee.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to protect the rights of the employer in this instance.
Yeah,
make sure they've got it down pat.
So are we talking to business owners today? Who's this directed at, this conversation, really?
I think it's directed to everybody. I mean, it's awareness all around. Business owners specifically, because that's their responsibility. It's their onus of responsibility around what they need to do, provide that safe workplace.
I mean, you're right. Essentially, it's everyone's responsibility to make sure everyone's not feeling victimized and harassed, right?
Correct. And making sure they've got a mechanism to be able to talk to someone, whether it's a peer or their direct supervisor. You know, again, there's so many different nuances, Matt, in reference to how that could work. You know, it could be issues between people on site, could be issues between supervisors and, you know, managers on site as well. So there's such a complexity around what we can do and how people need to work that through. I think it's just creating an open environment for discussion. It may not be as open as, you know, mentioning it or how's everyone feeling, generally speaking, in a toolbox meeting, as mentioned before, but having that ability to be able to communicate a one-on-one with people that you need to talk to, and having that openness around that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I guess, like you say, it sort of has to start at the top, and then you've got to make sure it filters down through the different, you know, levels all the way to the guy sweeping the floors. Correct.
And the thing is, from an employee's point of view, from a boss point of view, if you want to put it in that context, it's all about the impact on what workplace bullying does. You know,
sure.
Distress, anxiety, you know, non-productivity, the physical illness that comes with that, feelings of disconnection.
Mm-hmm.
And they're the sort of basics, day-to-day feelings of what people go through. But then there's the other extreme of obviously taking a WorkSafe claim, mental health, and then there's other elements around that where in some instances people could get really quite ill from their experience on site.
Yeah, and have you seen this whole conversation compound off the back of COVID and lockdowns, or is it sort of same?
I think it's same. I think look, COVID was crappy for pretty everybody, right? And it was really bad. I mean, it was a horrible scenario to be involved with. Everything changed for everybody in reference to that. I think as people come out of that and getting back to some sort of normality, I don't believe that it's got worse in reference to where we've come from a mental health or from a bullying harassment type scenario, but certainly it's still impactful and still quite prevalent on lots of sites. I mean, I work from home at most days. There's a residential building site across the road at the moment, and only just last week, the yelling and abuse of obviously an apprentice from someone on site that I could hear from my house across the road was just spine-tingling.
I mean,
it really was. It's not even coincidental. It's just that's the way it was.
Did you get over there and throw some business cards around? Or?
Oh no, look, I didn't. There was they were roofing at the time, and it was just it was pretty horrendous. I actually sat down. I actually sat on my veranda, just watched for a while, and just it was pretty confronting to watch, actually.
So, I mean, there's this whole, I mean, especially in Australia, you know, there's this culture around like take a joke, mate, kind of thing. And I see it on my Instagram all the time. Like what I saw someone yesterday where they were like the apprentice mobility test, you know, where they had like the plank of 2x4 down the back of the apprentice's t-shirt, and they got him to lie down, and they just like nail gunned him, and he cheated. He couldn't get off the ground, and everyone's laughing and carrying on, me included. But you know, like that, I suppose today, like that could potentially be quite a risky thing to do.
Well, it is, and I think as the new generation of apprentices come through, they've, without wanting to sound silly about it, I think there's a higher awareness of what mental health and how impactful it is on
Totally,
you know, our sort of 17 to 30-year-olds. I mean,
I think as well, probably because of that, there's also like quite a lot of individuals that sort of know what they can get away with, and they're sort of willing to, you know, push the boundaries a bit there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I agree, and I think there's well-established organisations, businesses around that. It is a subtle part of their culture, but all they need is someone to come in and not accept that part of what that means to be part of that business, or what a little practical joke may you know, apply to. It just needs one person to take offence, and that's the reality. So
yeah,
we don't want to close down the fun of working in a team environment on a site, getting the job done, and what comes with that, the camaraderie, the, you know, all that sort of stuff. It's just like any sort of working team, right? But you know, there is a day and age now where some things are just not acceptable, and it takes one person to not accept it, and that creates a whole shit fight, to be quite honest.
Yeah, no doubt. And like the prevalence of that, I mean, probably hasn't changed so much in the landscape of the construction industry, but it's just now the awareness and, you know, the sensitivity towards it, for better or worse. I don't know. Like, I don't know.
Well, that's the question, isn't it? I mean, it is. It's that situation where, is it for better or for worse? I mean, as we've evolved through COVID and through this day and age, the sensitivities are heightened, and that's the reality of life that, as business people, we all have to contend with. It's, you know, it's people get cancelled for, you know, I've got young daughters, adult daughters. I mean, I'm 56 years old, and you know, I get cancelled for saying something that wouldn't be offensive in my day.
Oh yeah, for sure. I get it from my wife every 10 minutes.
Let alone what it could look like, and we know what it's like on a work site.
Yeah.
I mean, when you take that to the extreme, you know, it's not surprising that, you know, there's more claims around, and there is. I mean, I talk to tradespeople every week around absenteeism, for a start. There's normally a route to that in reference to why people are taking time off. The number of apprentices that don't actually get through their first 6 months in their apprentice, whether it's, you know, lots of different reasons, but you know, no one can really pinpoint what those reasons are if they decide that they're just going to leave. There is a sensitivity to the role, whatever the actual apprentice may be, whatever trade it may be. But there's a whole heap of stuff that actually is pretty intangible. It's something you can't really put your finger on, but I think there is some sort of holistic area around what that means, and what it means to work on a site. And if the culture is that she'll be right, mate, take a joke, blah blah blah. I think that may be a contributing factor to some of these issues with, you know, apprentices not working out.
So what are some of the consequences that could, you know, that arise out of, well, I mean, I suppose from both perspectives, you know, from the individual's perspective, and then from the perspective of the business or the, you know, the construction. I mean, I suppose that's the other thing, right? Like with a construction site, it's not just one business you're dealing with. You're dealing with how multiple businesses handle this conversation and culture. So that must be an even, you know, tougher gamut to navigate.
from a business owner's point of view, it's that loss of productivity. I think that's, in absenteeism, like I've mentioned, the disruption to the workplace, just that continuity of getting through a job and getting to the next job. It's a costly exercise if there needs to be some sort of mediation, counselling out area that's added cost to the business. We've all got insurances and stuff, but there's also the damage to the reputation if there's an issue that comes into a place where, someone actually leaves an employee and starts to spread that word around that I wouldn't work for these guys. And you see it all the time still, even with, and I've seen it with people putting ads out as well, how they actually are discriminating against particular types of people on ads to try and find an apprentice or find a labourer on site.
They're discriminating against people in their ads. What do you mean?
Yeah,
Like
they're
they
just
don't want any
saying,
women or something?
basically saying things like make sure you can handle the job and make sure you're reliable, and these types of things are really quite prevalent. It's crazy.
But how's that discriminating?
Well, in the eyes of the legislators, it is.
What you can't say, we're make sure you're. What did you say?
Well, I said something like, make sure you're reliable, make sure you've got your own car, things of that nature.
How's that discriminating? You're not going to go hire someone that's not reliable.
Well, there is an actual area under Fair Work, so it's completely different to workplace safety, but there's a Fair Work area around adverse actions where people can actually make a claim. This is without a word of a lie, easily looked up, but make a claim in an interview process that they were discriminated against in the interview, and as per the ad, they can actually make a claim against an ad being discriminating to them. So there's an adverse action type scenario that they can actually make a claim to Fair Work on.
I mean, the world's gone bloody mad if you can't say
it has.
That's just ridiculous.
But without them even getting the job.
I mean, imagine saying, you like not being able to say you need to have a car. Like, how's that discriminating? Is it discriminating against the car? You've either got a car or you don't.
Yeah, it's discriminating around the actual applicant not being able to be getting to a job on time, effectively. So there is a lot of finite issues with processes that creates that issues for business owners in this industry and in the trade industry. It's across all industries, to be quite honest, but it seems to be prevalent in trades, based on the fact that owners don't know what they don't know, and that's reality. They're great technicians, great builders, great electricians, great plumbers, but when it comes to understanding what their obligations are in managing people, employment relations, and fair work and work safe practices, that's where the education is lacking, and unfortunately, it's just part of that whole process. So sure. That's what we do. We try and educate and make people aware, and try and help them out if they need some help.
So, I mean, I'm curious to hear what, like, when we talk about, I mean, from back in my day, the common forms of, I suppose, bullying and harassment were just getting picked on as an apprentice, or name calling, or whatever it might be, right? But between now and then, there's been this whole world of social media and all this kind of shit that's come into play now. And how has that affected the like bullying and stuff like that in the workplace?
Well, bullying by definition is now very broad as well.
Sure.
Okay. I mean, not giving someone hours, for example, could be, they're changing their appropriate rostering of allocation of time. There could be someone basically, there's the obvious ones that we talked about, right? Picking, yelling at, physical abuse, verbal abuse, mental abuse, things like exclusions. People not inviting them to have, smoko with them, that type of stuff. It's all in the interpretation of what bullying is. So it's very, very broad. Setting unrealistic goals in reference to what they need to achieve on the day, for example. This is your job. This is what you're going to get done. And if that's unrealistic from the perspective of the employee, that could be perceived as bullying. There's so many elements around what bullying now means. It's not just the obvious, sort of physical or intimidatory type aspects. It's not inviting them to the pub at the end of the day on a Friday, or people can interpret that in different ways. And that's the reality of what interpretation is and what it means from the awareness of what people think bullying might be.
I mean, it just sounds so ridiculous, really. Like the whole, like so much of it just sounds so ridiculous. I mean, that's me coming like from an old fossil, right? I guess I'm putting myself back in the, back when I went through my apprenticeship, like that stuff would just never have flown. But I guess now the question is, well, okay, fine. If this is a reality, how the hell do you navigate it? Like, what do you do?
You have to
talk. You still have to talk to people, right?
Yeah, you do have to talk to people. That's right. But the human nature is that what's happening in this day and age is not going to go away. It's probably going to get worse. There's probably going to go the other way in reference to what people can consider to be bullying, harassment, or have an issue that applies a mental health claim against, for a start. And we're not denouncing mental health. I mean, mental health is prevalent. It's serious. It's an issue. There's no issues about that whatsoever, right? So I think, I'll stick my hand up. We all go through periods where there is some uncertainty with your mental health.
Sure.
So,
well, actually, interestingly, I had a guy on the show who we were talking about this, and the paradigm that he said was everyone has mental health. It's just some is better than others, and it goes in waves. And I was like,
makes sense.
Yeah, like people think, I don't have any mental health problems. It's like, well, it's not always problems. It's just like, you go through stages.
Correct. And that's another podcast, Matt, in reference to that side of things. But what employers need to do is make sure they've just got their T's crossed and their I's dotted in reference to their documentation and processes. I mean, it's as simple as that. And that's the thing that we need to look at. Make sure you got to work health.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, from a specific bullying and harassment, mental health, even sexual harassment, right? There's that element too that we need to consider, because there's so many more females now working in trades.
Sure.
And not only that, it could be
transgender.
It could be homosexual. It could be all that sort of stuff around sexual harassment. It's not just the male-female scenario that you expect. You don't see too many, nudie pictures or page 3 pictures on worksheets anymore, right?
Yeah, sure. With the People magazine on the smoko table.
Correct. So from that perspective, you've got that element to consider as well. But getting the documentations right, and it may not mean making sure that they're up to date and they know the processes, making sure that they're actually understanding what their duty of care is and putting in processes in place and having people sign off on the policies. When you employ a new apprentice, make sure they understand what the bullying harassment is, what policy is. Make sure they understand what it means to drive the company vehicle and have your company uniform on and get caught down to the pub at 11 o'clock at night doing something stupid. That type of stuff. Making sure that the policies are in place that they clearly understand. And there's a ream of policies that employees should be aware of and should acknowledge that they've understood that. Because what happens then is that not only has the actual employer understood their due diligence, understand what the risks are, had a risk management process in place, have actually done their duty of care and mitigated it by having people aware of all the different areas that they need to be aware of and acknowledge. And then, as importantly, record keep it. Make sure that you're noting down things that happen in reference to incidents, making sure that you've got a process that you can go back on. It's a paper trail. If WorkSafe comes knocking based on someone's claim that they're bullying, harassed around something that may be, as we've discussed, seemingly ridiculous and seemingly, inappropriate, then if they've got the policies and they've got the record keeping in place, then they're protected. They have at least a duty of protection that they've applied themselves. So that's the challenge of getting employers specifically on track with mitigating bullying and harassment, and mitigating any issues that may create a problem for them and their business when it comes to a claim around
So
it.
would you say that this is part of like an onboarding process for staff, or is it part of an induction process for a building site, or is it yes to both?
Yeah, yes to both. And it's not just, I don't know about you, but there's so many sites and so many employers that still don't even have employment contracts with their people.
Right.
Creating what the actual reality of their employment relationship is, making it clear, having a contract in place, but then having policies that can be changed by the owner of the business. So it's an induction. It's part of the whole induction.
So what are some of the policies? What are some of the like top 5 or 10 policies that business owners out there should have?
They should have. They should have a few things. They should have an absentee policy. How do they actually call in sick?
Right.
I met with a trade business yesterday saying, I'm sick of my staff taking the pee out of texting me 3 times a week saying they're stuck on the freeway and they're getting into work at 10, 20 minutes late every single day, 3 times a week. So policies on absentees and what they need to do to make sure that they inform their employer. They need to look at obviously things like social media, things like drug and alcohol. If they're coming in feeling affected by alcohol from the night before or whatever, what is the policy? How are they going to actually have in place a process that can say, hey Matt, you need to leave today, or whatever you need to, I'm going to send you home because you're not right. I mean, it needs to be that sort of clarity about what the process is in reference to that. Obviously, sexual harassment we've mentioned, the pros and what needs to be looked at, the bullying and harassment side of things. As I said, social media.
Hang on. So what's that?
Just posting inappropriately on the company's website or their Facebook page, or putting up a photo that may create some sort of disrepute in reference to the business.
That's what like you kind of tying into what you were saying before about going to the pub at 11 o'clock at night in your work uniform. Like, what's to say you don't post a stupid video on Instagram of you doing something with a work business logo on you, like stuff like that?
And it's happened.
Sure, it has.
It's happened. A policy in place to make sure they understand that, because all of these things come to where the employer sits with, what do they do about a situation like that arises, right?
Wasn't that case in, I thought it was in New Zealand or something, where the guy robbed like a 7-Eleven or something, and he had a balaclava on, but he had his work logo on his shirt. So
yeah, I think it was robbing a bottle shop, wasn't he?
Bottle shop, maybe, yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Oh, look, that social media is a real issue in reference to that. Grievance policy. How do you go about making a complaint within the? It may be a complaint against a supplier. And bullying harassment is not just about your mates at work. It's someone who's dropping off the plasterboard on site. Or how do you go about a policy around capability, saying that they've got this and this certification, but they don't? How do you actually manage that process when they come on site and they can't do what the job's? If you don't have a policy in place for capability, and you don't have any process, it becomes a word, the employer's word against the employer. If they're employed to do a certain job and you've taken them on, and it's quite prevalent again because there's such a shortage of people out there, right, at the moment in reference to getting trades on site. You employ them to do a job, they can't do the job. You don't have a policy in place. They might be able to fudge it for a month or two. You finally work out that they don't know what they're doing. How do you actually move them on? That's the reality. You've got to have a policy about their capability to do that job, and they have to show their certification. Maybe they have to show other areas of accreditation about what they're doing. Maybe they need to show obviously everyone can get a white card and all that sort of stuff is there, but it's just some of the more specific stuff around that. What have you
I fail to see how showing like hiring, like surely that's a discrimination.
Well, again, this is the thing
Anyway.
about discrimination. It's an interpretation,
Right.
and when the bottom line, Matt, is if an employer doesn't have the paper trail to cover themselves off in reference to making sure that they've asked for this, and this, and they've acknowledged it. If it's falsified, then it's misconduct. That's instant dismissal. Bang, they're out of there. Do you know what I mean? So it's the paper trail. It's the process. Sure. And that's super important in all areas, not just around how they deal with the mental health claim from someone from a harassment perspective.
So, I mean, essentially, it's going to become, or it has become, I should probably say, a case of, as part of your onboarding, you need to read every single one of these policies and then click this button to say that you've read and you've understood everything. Yeah,
and there's a heap of different options around that. There's software, there's apps. It's pretty easy. All the documentation is also then stored on cloud.
Sure.
Employees can access that at any time. They've acknowledged that they've signed it off. That's really ticking the boxes from the employer's point of view, from the manager of the site or the business, in reference to making sure that they've seen that information.
I mean, it's almost like terms and conditions. It sounds like, where you've got like pages of it, and at the bottom is a button to say, "Do you understand these terms and conditions?" Click here, and like, is that sort of where it's going, or is it more? No, we need you to completely understand. Like, we need to quiz you on this. Did you read this? Do you understand these? Like, how deep do you go with this?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's how important it is to the employer in the end, to be honest with you, because the reality is that they've minimized any potential scenario where they could get themselves in strife with either a fair work body or a worksafe body by having the information. How many times have you signed something? Again, I'll stick my hand up. When I sign something that I've bought, I haven't read any T's and C's. I've just signed it. I want to take it away with me. Or I've 100%. And that's something that happens. But from a safety net and safeguarding the business, it's just having those processes in place, and having the tick boxes, and having an app, or having whatever you want to put into place to make sure your business is assured of minimizing any risk. That's the critical component.
Oh man, it's a crazy world.
It is a crazy world, and it's difficult for small businesses to, a 3 or 4 man team trying to get on with work and getting stuff done. The flip side to all these policies as well, if you've got a business that's growing and they want to start quoting and bidding for bigger jobs, a lot of these particular tenders or jobs that they're quoting for, they require all these policies and stuff to be in place as well. They ask for this documentation around what are their policies for this, and this.
Okay.
It's not just about having their SWIMs and their safety operating procedure in place. They've got to have a system.
So, I mean, yeah, I guess that's kind of like, it sounds like a lot of work, and it probably is initially, but once you've got the templates created, it's just a case of read this, tick here.
Yeah, and there's lots of ways you can do it. You can have someone manage it for you and get it all done, and just put the whole processes. They spend half a day with you, get your business out of your head into theirs, and they document it. They never tell you how to run your business. They never tell you who to pay what. Never tell you. They don't mess with how you want to operate your business and how you want to treat your staff from a commercial point of view, what you're paying them, what their allowances are, all that sort of stuff.
What are the obligations like beyond the initial, like, read this policy, check the box? Like, what does it look like from a training perspective, or what does it look like from a, like an ongoing? I mean, you talked about toolbox talks before, but like, how do you treat this like a living, breathing thing, as opposed to a one and done scenario?
Well, as opposed to the old white manila folder with all the paper SWIMs and throw in the back of the U.
I mean, it's really no different today to a Google Doc or a Google Sheet that you tick the box and never look at it again. Like, the point is, how do you make it part of the culture, and how do you manifest it in a way that people understand these values and they live and breathe them, as opposed to just checking the box and never looking at it again?
Well, it's a question of leadership, and it's a question of what's important again. But the reality is, it's easily done now with a mechanism through cloud-based apps, cloud-based access to information. If every time there's a toolbox meeting, or start with maybe 2 a month when you do a toolbox meeting, and you say, get your app out, guys. Let's tick that we've seen it and read it. Make a comment. If there's a near miss on a site where someone may have hurt themselves, or they see something that could be a risk to a workplace injury or accident, and they jot it down, they just put it down, pull out the phone, pop it in. It's no different to sending a text or writing a message or swiping on Tinder, to be honest.
Sure.
It's really simple from the point of view of getting people to start thinking about how they can actually report that. And again, with younger people coming through the bottom end of their careers and their through trades, they're really accustomed to using those types of technology. I think, and again, talking to a number of clients that I have, they can embrace that. They know how important it is and how simple it is to be able to apply those sort of things. That becomes part of the culture. And I think what happens with that, Matt, is that not only does the record keeping become part of it, but the awareness actually grows. It's being able to understand the importance of these policies and what they actually mean. We can apply new trainings, new swims. You can get them updated as frequently as possible. Say, hey guys, here's a new safety operating procedure for this, and this. We're on a new site. It's got different risk element. You need to have a look at that.
Sure, which was always where I came from. That was the purpose of a toolbox talk. It was those things, which still makes sense to me. But then all the other stuff, I just don't know how you'd. Well, I mean, I guess I do know how you would incorporate it, but it just like, from an ignorant perspective, where I'm coming from, it feels kind of like it's just like a compliance thing. You're just ticking boxes to protect yourself, as opposed to ticking boxes because there's a real necessity for it.
I think one becomes the other. I think, look, compliance is it's a non-sexy word. No one goes into business to follow compliance, right? They go into business because they love what they do. They're a good tradesman. They're generally good with people. They can create things. All that sort of stuff is what people go into business for. You've got compliance with the ATO, you've got compliance with Fair Work, and you've got compliance with work health and safety legislation. But there's a way you can mitigate that, and have that as, you need to think about it and put it into play, and you need to action it in a way that is easy to adapt and incorporate into your day-to-day business. And I think that's
when you're incorporating these things, like someone puts in like a bullying report or something, right? And it gets submitted. Like, my question is there a scale? Like, is there like, okay, well, this guy walked up and punched me in the face, but like higher end of bullying, or this guy didn't invite me to the corner shop for a coffee this morning, bullying on another scale? Like, where's the
Well, in the process normally happens. Well, not normally. There's nothing that's normal here. But an occurrence that happens frequently is that someone feels they've been aggrieved, they feel like they've been left out, or they've been physically bullied, or they've been mentally bullied, or they've been psychologically bullied, or whatever the case may be. That's their interpretation. The next thing that normally happens is they start having higher absenteeism. They don't come to work, they're not reliable, they're creating an issue. The boss gets cranky, asks them what's going on, and they either tell them that or they just resign. If it gets too hard for people, and it's so easy for people to resign, especially in the trade world, they can just go get a job somewhere else pretty quickly.
So why is that a problem?
Why is that a problem?
Like, if they resign and go somewhere else. So
yeah, but they still have the right, when they resign, to actually submit a claim for bullying and harassment.
Right. So now it's not unfair dismissal. It's like you've sacked them for being a pansy or whatever. You determine like
adverse actions. Exactly. I mean, this is a Pandora's box, Matt. It really is. You're opening up one, and it's creating a whole heap of different scenarios. And this is the challenge with employers, with business owners. Keeping on top of that is critical, and it's hard. And as I said, it's put to the side as a general rule. And I'm not saying this is meant to be the right solution or the right option for most people, because you know, you got to be pretty unlucky, I suppose, in one sense, to be subjected with a claim, whether it's from a fair work perspective or a work-safe perspective. But when that happens, shit hits the fan big time, right? Because you then either have to get into mediate the situation and create a scenario where it goes away. If it doesn't go away, that's when it gets really, really messy. And it gets really, really costly as well. You know, a fair work claim is going to cost a business a fair amount of money, potentially, up to 26 weeks of wages. In some cases, 26 weeks of wages, and you have to re-employ them. You know, these are some of the decisions that happen. You know, there's so many extremes around that. But in a WorkSafe type scenario, it could happen. It could be a simple workplace accident. Obviously, you've got your work cover that covers costs. It's an insurance, but work cover doesn't cover any issues with any WorkSafe claim or investigation. And that's where the fines come on top of any other work cover issues that you have to contend with.
Hang on. WorkSafe doesn't cover claims?
No, WorkSafe is an investigation, right? WorkSafe is when there's a workplace accident or a claim, they come in. A lot of the loss of wages and costs around medicals, that gets normally covered by work cover insurance, right? Separate. Work cover insurance is separate to WorkSafe. WorkSafe is the governing body that investigates, you know, a safe working place, and that's where there's the two differences, you know. So WorkSafe is there to make sure they protect the right of the employee when there is an unsafe meaning physical, accident prone, or mental workplace. And that's the onus of the responsibility of the business owner to make sure they do everything possible to minimize any risk and keep their workplace as safe as possible. So the distinction between work cover and WorkSafe, right?
Yeah, gotcha.
And WorkSafe has the fines. They come down. You know, little Johnny's had an accident, fallen off a roof, broken a leg. He didn't have anything in place, no documentation. As soon as an ambulance is called, and it's a workplace accident, then it automatically triggers a alert to WorkSafe, and then they will instigate an investigation. It's a separate body that you're dealing with. If they come and say, well, you don't have this, and this in place, then there could be, and more often is, a fine that is actually then applied to the owner for not keeping a work safe that's safe. And
so the question I ask you is, how do you, like, what are those things? Like, what are the things that, where is the resource of things that you need in order to make sure you are compliant?
Well, as I said, it's really about making sure you've got your policies and your documentation in place. I mean,
but is there a resource for what those policies and documentations are, or are you the resource?
Well, I'm a resource. Yeah, that's true. But there's any sort of HR consultant or occupational health and safety sort of professional can provide resources around that. That's certainly an option. But it's, as I said, if I go back to there's three areas, it's due diligence. So the responsibility is for the owners to make sure they try and understand where their risks are. And sometimes that's difficult. Like you said, you don't know what's going to trigger someone for a mental health claim or a bullying, harassment, or whatever claim. That's difficult, but you need to try and understand that. Once you understand what they could be, and we can come in and we can give you a highlight, an overview of what those issues are based on your workplace, and whether it's on site, whether it's in the workshop, whether it's driving to work, whether it's in your vehicles, whether it's on machinery, whatever the case may be. We'll actually give you a list of all the things you need to think about. We alert the risks, help you understand the risk. Then you need to look at what you put in place to mitigate those risks with duty of care. And that's normally in a source of documentation suite, policies, handbooks, inductions, videos, whatever you need. And then it's the process of making sure you can keep that information and record keep it. And that's where the apps come in.
Yeah, gotcha. Oh man, it's definitely a changing world. I mean, I'm now looking at, like, you know, the Safe Work Australia website and trying to figure out, okay, well, like if you're trying to get information about this stuff and what you actually need, it's not like it's super easy. I mean, I guess you go to industries and then you can, like, navigate through to the different, like, things.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I mean, we all know how busy it is out there at the moment with trades. Who has the time?
I know. That's right.
Right. I deal with a lot of trades that their wives or partners get involved and they try and manage that, but there's still the process of understanding. They can get some a templated information or download a PDF or whatever the case may be, but it changes. I mean, this year there's a significant number of changes with a heap of awards as well from the government. As soon as the government changes, there's normally some sort of change in reference to,
Of course,
with Fair Work or award system or whatever the case may be. Who knows how do you keep on top of changing allowances with trades, whether you're an electrician or a plumber or a carpenter or a bricklayer? Every award is different. There's 122 awards in the Australian workplace.
I mean, I reckon that's the easy one. That's just EBA rates, right? Like all these other policies and stuff, though. Like that's a freaking nightmare. Like you say, Pandora's
the rates.
box.
The flip side to that, though, just to go back to that question about the EBA rates, is that most trades that I come across with are paying above the award anyway,
right?
Because commercially they have to.
Well, commercially they have to, or they have to just in order to get the team members.
Correct.
Right.
They have to make sure they get the right people. So make sure they can't just pay an award rate and expect someone to come and work with them when someone down the road is paying them $5 extra an hour.
Sure. Sure.
Is in that. And then how do you work on what that actually includes? If you're paying them above the award, are you also paying their annual leave loading? Are you actually paying their allowances, their tool allowance and their travel allowance and their vehicle allowance, all that sort of stuff that comes with it? So, so there's a heap of stuff around that. We as I said, we can help organisations in that space as well. But my passion is
it's a good thing, Frank, because it's confusing as hell.
Yeah, exactly right. And and I do feel for people, as I said earlier, in reference to when they're in reactive mode, when they're under the pump because someone's put a claim in. That's the time that so much more energy is sucked out of their day. They're busy enough trying to get on top of quotes and invoicing their customers and all that sort of stuff in reference to running their business, let alone having something like this that comes in and creates an added problem and time and energy.
Yeah.
So what I'm all about is to be proactive. Get yourself sorted out. Come in, let someone come in and do an evaluation of what you've got in place. Give an idea what it's going to cost you or what sort of investment you need to do in reference to getting it right, and then setting yourself up for just to make sure it's soundproof and it's going to be foolproof in reference to any issues. That's the way to go.
Well, mate, thanks so much for coming and sharing that stuff. It's all news to me, to be honest. Like the world's changed a lot, apparently. But yeah, and I imagine for a lot of the listeners and viewers out there, they've probably, for better or worse, this is the world now. So you know, like Frank says, you got to get this stuff in line, or you can leave yourself open to a impending shitstorm.
Yeah, correct. It's certainly a changing world, and so much more responsibility on having a passion of following your dream and becoming an electrician or a plumber. It's a lot more involved than just doing that these days.
So one last question is: what we've spoken about today relevant across different markets? Like is workplace and safety obligations and policies and things like that relevant in Australia the same way they'd be relevant in the US and vice versa?
Oh, look, I'd say so. I think, look, I don't know 100% to answer that question, honestly. I know workplace compliance issues between Australia and New Zealand are virtually same. There's that commonality in reference to what's accepted. And I would dare say that will be the same in most Western countries.
Anyway.
Yeah, they've got to be similar. It's about making sure that employers are keeping a workplace that's safe, and doing the right thing by their employees, and in the process protecting themselves from any issues from any fines or issues around that.
Where's the best place for people to get hold of you if they want to get more info or hit you up for
Yeah.
a chat?
Website, workplacecompliant.com.au.
Yeah.
Is probably the best way. I've got a scorecard on there, which actually people can answer 20 odd questions around their business and get a pretty good indication of where they sit.
Oh, is that on the homepage?
That is the homepage.
Great. Okay.
If you jump on there, it tells you what you do. It goes through a whole heap of questions around your employment relations stuff, policies, work health and safety stuff. And it spits out some information in reference to where you're ranked, what your ranking is, or what your scorecard is in reference to best practice and compliance.
Right. Well, that's a great resource. So for you guys out there watching or listening to this, go check that out. There'll be links to that in the show notes, by the way. So if you're driving or whatever, don't freak out. Just head across to the siteshed.com and search Frank, and this podcast will come up.
Anyone who wants to have a chat with me directly, again, you can contact me there, or if you want to put some other details on the notes, that'd be great as well.
I'll give everyone your mobile number, mate.
That is fine. That is fine.
I wouldn't do that. Anyway, that's great. Thanks so much for your time. It's been enlightening, slightly terrifying, but enlightening nonetheless. I just encourage you guys out there. It's probably stuff you shouldn't be overlooking. Sounds like it's here to stay and potentially getting worse or more prevalent, I should say.
Correct. Matt, I appreciate the time. Thanks for the opportunity, mate.
You bet. All right, mate. We'll chat soon.
Okay. Take care.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Siteshed podcast. If you like the sound of 30 qualified proposals in the space of 90 days, I just want to recap. Head across to tradie.wiki/offer. Watch the videos, fill in the form, and make sure you book a time to have a chat with me. This is for businesses that are making $50,000 a month in revenue, are located in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, or the USA, and you're a trade business or a contractor that works with project-based work. Head across to tradie.wiki/offer. Yes, I realize it sounds too good to be true. Trust me, it works. Do it now. I look forward to chatting to you soon. Ciao.